Welcome to the part 2, guys. We'll be discussing about how you can write the React components. We'll touch upon what is JSX and how you can write it, and what are the caveats of writing JSX, and how it gets transpiled to JavaScript under the hood, which renders your HTML eventually on the browser. So before starting with React components, let's talk about web components in general. So web components is an ideology, and it's a way of looking the web page or a web app in the form of components built inside other components. So for example, if we take this illustration, and we can see, for example, in the left hand side we have the sidebar, which have these individual items, and each individual item has an icon and a text, and it might have some badge as well. And the same way on the right hand side is another main component, and inside those main components divided into 3 subcomponents: overview, current balance, earning summary, and the fourth one is recent orders. And each of these components have subcomponents. The first one has for example 3 subcomponents, and in each of those components have this repeating rhythm, wherein the first element is the number, second element is the a subtext underneath, and the third element is an icon. So you can establish this sort of visual rhythm and hierarchy based on, so the components are part of other components, so they can be nested within each other. So this is how we are supposed to look at our web apps, and also make that reflection in our code base. So we have to organize our code based on this component based approach rather than writing everything into one single file. So far we have this with us. It's our app component that was already present when we bootstrapped the application. So let's get rid of it, and let's see how we can write our own React component. So for writing a React component, you have to create one new file most of the time to segregate the stuff, segregate the one component per file. That's one design guideline. So we have to import React first. So the way you do is like this: import React from React. And there are 2 ways to create React components. One is by using a class keyword, and the other is by using the function keyword. So we'll explore both of those, but before writing any React components, we have to get familiarized with JSX, because that's how we write our components. So for example, if I write something like input type equals to text, and placeholder equals to enter your name. So if I write this, it looks like HTML, that I'm writing HTML. Actually, it's not HTML. The way when React compiler compiles this thing, it gets turned into something like this: react.create element, because this is actually JavaScript, it's not HTML. So it look like this: react.create element. As you can see, the first argument it takes is the component name or the component class, and in case if it is an HTML component that we want to render, we'll just pass the string here. And in the second argument, it accepts all the arguments or all the attributes of that component that we want to create. So for example, here we have 2 attributes: the type and the placeholder. So they'll go like this: type, text, and placeholder as whatever placeholder we have, enter your name. And in the third argument, if that particular there are some meta properties like the children. If suppose this input element had some children in between, had some nested elements inside it, so they'll also they'll also make an array sort of thing here, and they'll also get converted to all this stuff. For the sake of discussion, it might look like this, right? So that's how it works under the hood, right? So please be mindful that you are not writing HTML, and also it can be noted. So for example, for the way you write a class in HTML is by using this class keyword, but actually you can't use this class keyword inside a JS file, because it will get confused with the class keyword that JavaScript has. So class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, so when it'll get transpiled, it might clash with that thing and it might misbehave. So the way that ReactJS has provided a way for this is by using the class name instead of the class keyword. So you can write any of your CSS classes here by using the class name keyword. And also for example, if I want to use autofocus as one of the attributes, so this is not valid here because this is JavaScript and it can't accept these hyphenated properties. So all those hyphenated properties are supposed to be written in the camel case, and React identifies it and eventually converts that into in the snake case on the kebab case, like that, when it makes to the browser. So if you inspect this in the browser, it will still be like this, but while passing here, because since this is JavaScript, you have to use the camel case. Okay, so that was about the JSX. Let's start with the writing component. So the way you write a component using the class-based syntax is you write a class and give a name to the component. The name of the class should always start with a capitalized keyword, or else the linters will give a warning. And it has to extend the React component class. You have to call the constructor. Maybe this is optional, but like this, super props. You have to call the parent class constructor, just the normal OOP stuff, object-oriented stuff. And every component, every class-based component has to have this required method called as render, which will return the JSX that will actually get rendered when we'll use this app component elsewhere in our project. So for example, if I am using, let's create a section with a class named as app section, let's say, and here inside, let's say I have a paragraph, hello from app, right? And as you can see, this is a little blurred out. Why? Because it says app is declared but never used, right? Because we have declared it but we aren't using it anywhere, which means we'll have to export this component out of this file to be used elsewhere in our project. So I'll do something. I'll have a default export of app from this component, from this file, and I'll be able to use this app component, for example, in my index.js as it's being already used. So this is a default import. I'm importing from the app. Had it been a named export, I would have imported it like this, but this is a default one, so we don't have to worry about that. And it is already being called like this. So all the React components, be it function-based component or class-based component, they are called like this. So this invocation here, again, as I mentioned, will get translated to react.createElement, and the first argument will be app. So now here we didn't pass it in this way because this is not an HTML component, rather it is our own component factory, which when called under create element, it's our custom component basically, and which when called will execute the render method and will return elements from inside it. And in turn, if these elements weren't also included some of the custom React elements, the same approach will follow. It will follow so on. So that's how it works, and let's see what we have so far. So it says hello from app. So if we see our HTML, if we inspect it, we see this section here right away, and we see this content basically. I'm sorry, I mistakenly have to pass it this way. So React is a little forgiving, but you have to take care of these things. And inside the section class, we have this paragraph, and which says hello from app, right? So you can see how from JavaScript it get converted into HTML on the fly. So those are the things that works under the hood, as I explained how. And let's see a little more. Let's see how we can dynamically pass this greeting from the parent element, from anywhere this element is being referred to. And for example, I want to have this greeting as an attribute from this component. So for example, I pass a greeting as a property this is called as React prop, React component prop. And if it is going to be some JavaScript expression, let's say a ternary expression, true, false, based on something, hello from index, let's say, right, or hello from something like this. If it was if considering this was a JavaScript expression which had to be evaluated based on certain flag, so it'll look like this. But since this is a normal textual string property, I can simply pass it like this. And inside our component, in our app component, we have to get a hold of this property that we just passed. So the way we get that is, so all the properties, so this is a class, when it will get instantiated, the properties will get available on this object. So this dot props hold all the, it's an object which holds all the properties. So it might look like this. This dot props equals to greeting colon whatever we pass from, you know, the parent component, hello from index. And then we can have this property written here like this, and we'll save all the files, both the files. And now we see here we get hello from index, right? So now so this is a very common or very useful thing of React components, that you can pass the properties, or any of the web components talking about in general. So you can make your components behave in a specific way their parent wants, right? So this is a very contrived example, but as we move forward we'll see the benefit of this. And yep, that's about a class-based component. Now let's see how we can create a function-based component. So the way we create a function-based component is by simply writing a JavaScript function. Again, its name has to start with a capitalized keyword alphabet, and the properties are passed as a parameter to it. So you don't have to use this anyhow. It's a pure function which simply returns the JSX that we might need. And again, any properties, any JavaScript expressions will look like this. Inside the curly brackets you'll have to write all the dynamic stuff. So we are looking for the property called as greeting, and very simply we reduced a lot of unnecessary code and it'll still behave the same way, right? So if we see here, it's just this paragraph tag which is rendering this paragraph tag, and the content is coming from the parent element as from the prop. So that was about creating React components. And a pro tip is that you always create the React components, one component per file. It's called as a single responsibility principle. So as you move further, you know, in larger projects, it becomes very difficult to manage a lot of, although you can write, you can export multiple components inside from, for example, from this file, let's say comp1, comp2, you can export it like this as a named export, and you can import it elsewhere as well. But it's recommended that you create one component per file to keep the separations of concern clear, right? So that was about the React components. We discussed how we can write the React components using the class-based syntax and the function-based syntax. In the coming section, in the next part, we'll discuss about the React components anatomy in more detail, about the lifecycle methods it has.